Okay, welcome back. So we spoke there about the union relationship and Qantas's bid, or Jetstar's bid, to get more flights to Bali, and the intervention of the ACCC. As we record this on a Tuesday afternoon, earlier today we've had another very, very intriguing story break about the power of competition in the Australian industry. Jake, tell us a little bit more about what we've learned.
Yeah, so this comes to us from Dr. Andrew Lee, who is the Assistant Minister for Competition. This competition task force that the federal government has, they've come out with figures saying that on average, on routes with only one carrier, routes with only one character, that being Mickey Mouse, on routes with only one carrier, airfares average 39.6 cents per kilometre, 2 carriers 28.2 cents, 3 carriers 19.2 cents. And Dr. Lee has basically said, in other words, the price per kilometre is halved when 3 competitors fly a route compared with the situation when there is only a single monopoly airline. He says with 4 or 5 competitors, the price drops further still. So essentially, high airfares have been the talk of the aviation industry for quite a while now. And what Andrew Lee is saying is, these new entrants on routes, like, he didn't name names, but Rex and Bonza, for example, they are putting downward pressure on prices. And it seems like a no-brainer, doesn't it, when you think about it? Because, if there's extra supply, the whole supply and demand, if there's extra supply of seats, then the prices are going to come down because it will dilute the demand.
The problem is that we have seen much higher prices than usual kind of post-COVID. And the airlines always kind of make out as if this is something totally and utterly beyond their control. And some of their arguments, they do have a little bit of a point. So they will say the price of jet fuel went up, and then it went down a little bit, but now it's skyrocketed up again. And that's obviously due to many factors, but the war in Ukraine, the instability in the world. They would talk about, inflation, cost of living, all of those factors. They would also talk about, having to hire so many new people, etc. But the fact of the matter remains that Qantas had, I think if it wasn't the all-time, it was almost all-time record yearly profits. I think it was like $2.5 billion at the end of the last financial year. You had Virgin, for the first time in, 7-8 years, actually turn a significant profit. So if they wanted to...
turn a profit at all.
Turn a profit at all, yes. But if they wanted to, they could usually use all that money that Alan Joyce is sort of swimming around in a bath of notes.
Also to make his promo videos.
Yes, exactly that. So they say, it's out of our control, there's nothing we can do about it. But as this data shows very strongly, the second that they are forced into competition and significant competition, they have no choice but to act. One of the problems we've got in this industry, which again isn't news to anybody, is that at best we can say we've got a duopoly of Qantas and Virgin. In reality, we've got a monopoly, and that Qantas have, depending on how you cut it down, 65 to 70% of the market. So they're so utterly dominant. You've got them, Virgin, and then 2 smaller players, very small players relatively, in Rex and Bonza, who struggle to even get in there. Unless we get more competition, the prices are never going to come down.
Could I ask a bit of a layman's term?
Yeah, no, of course. That's why you're here.
That's exactly why I'm here. But coming into 2026 or so, when the second airport opens up in Sydney, Western Sydney, how is that going to affect competition in terms of flight costs?
It's probably going to be pretty big, because one of the big problems. Have you listened to our podcast, Ben?
Sure. No, yes, absolutely. Once or twice. I'm an avid listener.
As a regular listener to our podcast, you will know that Sydney Airport is basically full to bursting.
Yes.
There is not a lot of slots, takeoff slots to go around, and there's accusations that Qantas and Virgin are basically gaming the system. Accusations that they have consistently strongly denied, that they are gaming the system to, keep as many slots as possible to themselves, especially in prime, morning and evening takeoff times, keeping as many of these to themselves as possible, and boxing out smaller competitors like Rex and Bonza. And so Sydney is like the biggest aviation market in the country. Every airline wants a piece of Sydney because it's the main international gateway, and it's the biggest city in Australia, no matter what Melbourne says.
Boo.
Certainly, it's Australia's busiest airport, and in terms of Sydney Airport, there's not a lot of room to get in there. Whereas when Western Sydney opens up without a curfew, there will be so many more slots out there at Western Sydney, and so many more ways, times that you can get access to the Sydney market. There will be a whole bunch more capacity coming into the Sydney Basin, which
It's a game changer.
It's a game changer.
One of the interesting things we speak about is this concept of airports being monopoly organisations. And what we mean by that, in that in Australia, which is actually relatively unique globally, we have a situation where obviously Australia is divided up into its states and territories. And generally speaking, each of them has one major airport and then potentially some other very, very, very small alternatives. So therefore, if you want to fly to Melbourne, you've only got Melbourne Airport. You want to fly to Sydney.
I mean, you've got Avalon in
You
Melbourne.
have got Avalon. And shout out to our friends.
If you must.
No, we love Avalon, but it's
particularly the air show.
It is not on the scale. It doesn't have anywhere near the kind of capacity that the main, and I don't mean that as a derogatory term, as the main airport has.
So with London, you've got Gatwick,
exactly,
Luton, Heathrow, obviously, Paris. I think you've got
Stansted,
exactly.
Correct. But will you be seeing, and I don't think I've caught a flight that late, but will you be seeing flights that'll be taking off maybe at midnight, which are going to have passengers, or will there be regulations around that?
Western Sydney is not going to have a curfew.
Yes.
You can take off at any time you want from Western Sydney Airport.
But those latter, midnight till 6 a.m. or something will be reserved for, I'm assuming, cargo?
Exactly, but that's the thing. So firstly, this means the cargo planes can land at 3 o'clock in the morning, but that means that eventually the slots that would have been taken by cargo flights can then go to passenger flights.
Okay.
The comparison you made with the UK is very interesting because, in particular, I would say that the UK was certainly in Europe the first country that really turbocharged that kind of budget airline revolution. And one of the reasons that happened, you had Ryanair, obviously it was an Irish airline.
British always the first, though, right?
Of course. Anyway, the point is that you had obviously EasyJet and Ryanair initially. Yep. Now you've had lots of other ones follow suit. They tend to have the bulk of their operations in these smaller airports. They were able to do that because the capacity was there.
I mean, if you look at Avalon is mainly just Bonza and Jetstar. Those are the airlines that largely serve Avalon. I don't know if any other airlines fly to Avalon at all.
One of the dilemmas, though, is obviously on this show, in Australian Aviation, we're all for building more airports. Build them. But obviously you have people moaning, and that's the word about aircraft noise.
Sky
kittens. We'll talk about that stuff later, Ben. But you obviously have people moaning. And if we want to see real competition in our industry, the only way we're going to go about it is building more airports. Now, Western Sydney have the potential to be a trailblazer because for the first time we're going to have serious competition, and we're also going to have an airport that has been built from the ground up, whereas the other airports, as they try to modernise, they're having to build
they built from the air down, which was a feat of engineering.
Maybe it's worthwhile asking the listeners too, because get a bit more engagement on the podcast, on the YouTube. Where is their favourite secondary airports in the world?
Exactly. That is a very, very, very good point, because the secondary airports also tend to have a better customer experience as well if they're a little bit smaller. So Western Sydney has the potential to be a game changer for Australia. And if Western Sydney can prove it can work, and I think you will start to see lower fares in Sydney, there's also the potential of starting to see more secondary airports in Australia. And again, this is something we're going to talk about could be happening over the next few decades. But if we want to see prices go down, we need to be more airports.
Where is your favourite secondary airport in the world?
I love going to Luton, and no one loves going to Luton. I don't want to disrespect, but
great Premier League team.
It's.
I think that's Luton.
You look at what they've done there. I mean, it is entirely. I mean, it's certainly an experience if you've gone to Luton and queued up with the people to get a Ryanair flight. But no, I mean, that is the spark of the revolution. And it's so astonishingly cheap to fly around Europe. Like, you can go, if you go out of season, if you book a little bit in advance, you can pay 20, 30 of your English and you can go to Spain. That's bonkers. That's absolutely bonkers. And when you compare what you're getting for these cheap carriers in Europe versus the prices we're paying in Australia for domestic flights. It's absolutely criminal.
It is.
Well,
Alex,
I actually saw a screenshot of an article. I don't know the veracity of this, but it was talking about these friends. Like one lives in, I think, Manchester and one lives in Birmingham or something. And rather than it was more expensive, it would have been more expensive for one of them to get a train from Manchester to Birmingham or whatever than for both of them to fly down to Spain to meet up.
Yes, which is one and we've spoken about this off air. One, this is a symbol of an extraordinarily expensive British train system, but it also shows how cheap it could be. The difference here with Australia is obviously a lot of people are going on breaks and going on holidays, but these things are essential for business. There's much more of an element. This is essential infrastructure, and there's an argument here that we've not paid enough attention to it over the last 20, 30 years. Either we need to build those bullet trains, or you need to build some airports.
The government has put out another press release today about high-speed rail, so
really?
Hopefully we can get something
It's
going.
never going to happen.
Before I
It's
die.
never going to happen.
My second favourite, I think, is at Frankfurt Alf Bahnhof or something like that.
I say Luton, and you go for the fancy one.
Frankfurt Hauptbahnhof would be the train station.
Okay, one of the two.
Hauptbahnhof is a central train station.
Okay, sehr good, mein Herr. What's your favourite secondary aircraft?
I don't think I've flown into any secondary airports.
You're just a first airport sort of guy.
Yeah, well, no, it's
Traveller?
like I've flown into I've flown into LAX. I don't know if LA has a secondary airport. I'm sure we'll be told. But the only secondary airport that I think I have been to was Avalon. So I guess by default.
Yep. Absolutely.
Congratulations, Avalon.
Australia's favourite second airport. Right, we will see if we can squeeze in one more news story. And so we're gonna see an intervention now. I'm meant to be the pro, aren't I? So the boss of Emirates, Sir Tim, has rode into Qantas's defence
on a shining white A380 with a sword in hand, which. Very odd. Not sure how he
on behalf
survived
of His Majesty the King. Sir Tim, Jake, tell us a bit more.
Yeah, so he was speaking to Ross Greenwood on Sky News. Basically, Sir Tim Clark, Emirates has been a code share partner of Qantas since I think 2013. So long-standing relationship between Emirates and Qantas. And he's basically come in and said Qantas has had, this is a direct quote, a torrid time.
Bloody hell, old bean.
Qantas has had something of a torrid time, but they've kept a stiff upper lip. They've had a torrid time, but he said that that Alan Joyce did a good job guiding Qantas through the pandemic.
Jolly good show.
Yes. It's quite an excellent showing from old Mr. Joyce there. He said that did a good job guiding Qantas through the pandemic, especially considering these restrictive border policies. Now, this, of course, came a couple of weeks after this study by this consultancy firm that found that Qantas had slipped from the strongest brand in Australia in like 2018, 2019 to the 41st in 2023. So a precipitous descent. But he said, Qantas was not immune from the effects of COVID. He said, there was like this triple storm of things happening to Qantas. He said that he has confidence in, Vanessa Hudson and her new leadership team. He said they are utterly laser-focused on placating the concerns of the travelling public in Australia, restoring the brand to its former glory by doing the basics that people want. He said, talking to the team and Vanessa over the last few days, it's clear to me that they are not going to compromise on that. He said, I think eventually where Qantas will be up there as one of the top brands, it'll get there, and sooner rather than later, and the rest will be history. He also mentioned, he and Emirates is vested in the success of Qantas. Obviously, you would be as such a strong code share partner. He said that he is a firm believer that it was the right move to code share with Qantas. And he says, we continue to believe that this partnership will develop and provide a range of products, goods and services for the communities that we serve both in Australia and outside. So Tim Clark bang alongside Qantas and saying that, They've had a rough patch, but Qantas's brand will recover.
Now, two things I'm going to add to that is that Sir Tim and Emirates are very much the aviation success story of the last kind of couple of decades. In particular, obviously they're not the only carrier that flies with A380, but they have like 90% of them.
They have the world's biggest A380
the
fleet.
world's biggest A380 fleet, and they use the A380 not only to build this airline, but also to completely build the UAE to make this an extraordinary hub location. And if you look at their growth, we've obviously seen budget airlines that have kind of come out of nowhere, but in terms of a premium offering, nothing has quite had a kind of growth or changed the market like Emirates have done.
Because beforehand it was kind of Singapore or nothing.
Exactly. And what Emirates are doing now, what Emirates did is what Qatar are desperate to try to replicate. But certainly Emirates is seen as one of the great success stories, and a lot of people put that down to Sir Tim as being the kind of mastermind of doing this. And certainly he is kind of regarded as one of the, if not the most respected kind of airline bosses in the world. The second thing that he addresses is a point that isn't really heard in Australia, which is that the problems that are affecting Qantas are by and large the same problems that affected every other major airline in the country. So in terms of the fact that Qantas arguably got rid of too many staff during COVID and then scrambled to get everybody back, the delays, the cancellations, all of that we've seen globally. We've seen the exact same thing, but probably far worse in the UK with British Airways. But one of the differences is Qantas has taken a lot more bad publicity at home than the other airlines have seen abroad. You had a little bit of anger at these airlines a couple of years ago. Public largely forgotten about them. Now, one of the reasons for that is because, I'd say bizarrely, but Qantas is arguably the most well-known business in Australia. Maybe you could say like Combank or something, but generally speaking,
Coles or Woolworths.
Coles or Woolworths. But in terms of like the
high profile,
and so it was quite extraordinary that you could say Alan Joyce, when he was CEO, was not just the most famous business person, undoubtedly in Australia, but actually one of the most famous people in Australia. If you went up to a person on the street and you said Alan Joyce, they know who you are. They don't necessarily know who some stupid influencer is, but that is the profile. And so what?
Well, I mean, if you went up to a person on the street and said Alan Joyce, they'd probably say like, "No, my name is Sharon." Or
no, yes.
But that correlation between CEO and brand, that's the strongest relationship.
Well, and Sir Tim did say that Alan Joyce was a hero in the media for a while.
Yes, exactly. So what he's trying to do here is give some global context. He's trying to say, so he's standing up for Qantas. He's also kind of indirectly or directly standing up for Alan Joyce and saying, look, everybody is angry right now, but this will pass.
Something of a victim of its own success, perhaps.
Yes.
If again, coming back to the fact that there are really only two big airlines in Australia. If you're annoyed at British Airways, you can fly Ryanair or EasyJet or whatever other weird airlines you have over there. If you're annoyed at Southwest in America, you can go with JetBlue or Spirit or whoever else. Or if you hate Delta, you can fly American. If you're annoyed at Qantas here in Australia, what are your options? Virgin or Jetstar, which is also Qantas. I mean, now you've got sort of Rex and Bonza coming in, but even then, if you want to fly from, say, Sydney to Perth, neither Rex nor Bonza do that. If you want to fly from Sydney to anywhere, Bonza doesn't do that yet. So there's... If your options are reduced, then if you get annoyed with one airline, you're going to probably be more annoyed with them if you don't have alternatives.
And it does work both ways. Qantas were arguably more than happy to enjoy the good times. They were more than happy. In fact, when Vanessa Hudson, now the CEO, was the CFO, she in fact gave a quote to the AFR back in 2019 when they topped this brand poll, talking about how lovely it was. So if you want to enjoy the good times, the trade-off is when things go bad, it's amplified even more. But it is a very revealing insight into the aviation market here in Australia.
So to go from 1 to 41,
it's dropping. That's a bad drop.
That's out of the top 40. That's pretty bad for a pop star. But I do read the quote that Sir Tim made. Qantas needs to get back to being loved. Being loved. How do they do that?
It's going to be very
As
difficult.
opposed to being feared. Maybe Qantas should be feared. Rule the skies with an iron fist.
No, it's a Tim.
It is very difficult because obviously you can talk about the stats that we'll run on the website, but in fact you were on the show, Ben, talk about your bad experience with Qantas. We've had lots of people on the show. Jetstar. The Qantas group. But we've had lots of people on the show. And in fact, almost everybody, we're on, the journalists in Momentum Media who own Australian Aviation, we're on level 12. Because every time someone has a bad flying experience, they always come to me. But it's true, they do. They always chat to me.
And it's always just like, what do you expect us to do about it?
Yeah, no, that's true.
But I do think so.
It's not our fault.
Well, also just how Emirates, have made that flying experience more comfortable, or more Singapore Airlines as well. Like it is the things that they've done from in-flight entertainment now for the football fans that are listening out there, naming a stadium with the Arsenal and actually showing those games on the.
And totally agree. But
on entertainment.
The difference is that, and again, you've got to be careful exactly how you put it.
Sure.
These carriers are an extension of the country. They're an extension of the state, and to an extent, they have an almost infinite amount of money. They can afford to nominate, to sponsor the FA Cup, to sponsor a team, to sponsor a stadium. They can afford to buy an enormous fleet of A380s that nobody else could match. They can afford to, relatively speaking, employ more people. They can afford to give you more food. They can afford to buy up more movies. So the argument is Qantas can't do that. And if you were Alan Joyce and you were sort of on trial, he would say, well, yes, maybe standard slip, but I've got to earn a penny, and actually I made it a leaner and better organisation. So their struggle is that Qantas can't necessarily throw money at things in the way Emirates do. They're going to have to work on making that experience better, because at the moment it's kind of the word of mouth that have done it for them.
It'll be interesting to see how long they take to get back in using another pop reference, the top 10. Or to get even higher. I have worked in many roles, but in existing customer experience sort of survey group, and depending on the size of the people you're interviewing or just the data points you took, it would be very interesting to monitor where they're going from being 41st up to 30th to 20, and back do they get to the penultimate number 1. So watch this space.
Watch this space.